Hi, and welcome to the EBS-50 tutorials. In this tutorial, I'll take you through some of the most common troubleshooting steps if you have issues with your ESL server installation. Now, I've opened up my EBS-50.local webpage, and I can see I've got a warning on my screen for the ESLs. And it's telling me that out of the links, one has a weak signal, and two of them have low batteries. Well, those issues are quite common and easy to fix. The issue with a bad connection can basically mean, well, this ESL label might be a bit far away from the base station. It may be in a spot where there's a bad radio connection. But going to that list, it will just tell you, well, this is the ESL's MAC address. This is the unique ID of that ESL. This is the description, so you know where in the store you're supposed to start searching to find out what is wrong with it. And these steps are quite obvious. On the ESL list, it tells you exactly what is wrong. This one has a factory MAC address. This one has a low battery, so replace the batteries. But there are also a couple of common but weird bugs. So let's walk through a couple of them. One of the first issues that you can run into is on the base station tab. Now, right now I've got a base station that is connected. It's got 24 ESLs on board and everything seems to be working fine. But sometimes you might see the status switch between disconnected, back to connected, disconnected, back to connected. And that issue is commonly caused when there are two ESL server instances trying to talk to the same base station. Now, in an earlier episode, I updated from an existing Windows-based ESL server installation to the new ESL Server web application as hosted on the EBS-50 hardware. So if I go to the ESL server, you can see that the exact same base station with the same MAC address is still in my old ESL server. Well, the base station itself cannot make the difference between this is a device on the network asking me for information and this is the same device but actually a different piece of software trying to ask me this information. This switching between connected and disconnected basically means that the base station has two captains running the show, but it doesn't know that there are two captains. Now, right now, it's noticing just fine. It knows that there are two separate instances. However, we still recommend against it because, like I said, ESL Server is like the captain on the ship. It decides what links there are between ESLs and products, and it sends images to these ESLs, or even firmware updates, which are much bigger transfers of data. So we don't want two captains running the ship, so we'll just make sure that the old ESL server instance either is stopped completely, or at the very least, the base station is no longer on board. So that is a common issue with base stations. Another common issue that you might encounter with base stations is that they disconnect even though you know there are no other ESL servers in the vicinity. Here we went. That can happen if there are other devices on your network, like network crawlers, that try to map out what devices are present in the network. And they do this quite often. And if the base station is expecting to have good quality, consistent quality connection to your base station, and there's this one little program going, hey, can you give me some information about who you are? And then goes away again, that can hamper the communications between your ESL server and the EBS-40. So what you can do in that case is go to the IP address of the EBS-40 itself, and that gives you the user interface of the EBS-40. and you can say, you know what? I don't want you to listen to port 80, the default web port anymore, because that's where most scrolls are active on. So we pressed apply. It now tells us the configuration web page is now disabled. It also tells you immediately you can use the factory default procedure to re-enable it. Now, turning off the web page does not turn off the communications between the ESL server and the base station. If you may remember, when we manually added a base station in the base station episode, it uses a completely different port. But if you ever want to use the maintenance again, you can take your EBS-50 device and you can take off the power. Then you press this reset button next to the LAN port. You hold it down for a couple of seconds. You plug it back in. You keep it pressed down for another 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you let go. And now this base station goes back to its factory defaults. In the ESL Server software, we see the base station going offline, which means that the hardware has been factory defaulted. It has reset. So if we want to go to that page again now, it has been re-enabled by a factory reset. Those are the common issues you can see in base stations. Now, other issues that you might encounter, and those will also be shown on the dashboard, is when there's something wrong with your database. Well, right now we can see there's an issue with the ESLs. Well, no wonder, we were just messing around with the base station, so the ESLs are missing the base station at the moment. So they're not connected. But last time we saw them, they did have the image that they were supposed to show, so we're just not able to talk to them right now. Anyway, databases. In an earlier episode, we set up a connection to an external database. And every 30 seconds, it tries to synchronize. And once your database goes offline, this screen will say it's disconnected and it's no longer connecting and it cannot synchronize. Once again, the issue is quite obvious, and the troubleshooting steps are the same as if any device on your network can no longer talk to another device. You try to find out, where is the issue? Is it on the database side? Is it on the EBS-50 side? Is it somewhere in the network in between? But right now we are connected and there is no issue. Another issue you can encounter is that your products are completely empty. If that's the case, once again, your base station or your database may be online, but it's not working correctly. If that's the case and this list is empty, the first thing you can do is press this big blue button called refresh, and that basically forces that synchronization that we saw happening every 30 seconds to be done immediately. So if you know for certain that your database is back online, you can press this button. For instance, if your database synchronizes once a day and you don't want to wait for that moment to come, you can just press refresh and you're back online. So that brings me to one more common issue. Firmware updates keep failing. And firmware updates usually go wrong with ESLs. And that usually boils down to the communications between the base station and the ESLs. Our base stations, for instance, have an Ethernet connection. They're connected by wire that is reliable, high throughput, low latency, but the base station and the labels talk to each other through a low power protocol so that our battery powered ESLs can run for many years because the wireless communication protocol is so power efficient, but it also means that it has low bandwidth. If you're experiencing issues with ESL's not updating, it will be a good idea to check out what the LQI is. And if we show all the data of an ESL, LQI means link quality index, and basically it means how strong is the connection between me and the base station. And you can see here a couple, 105, 100, 102, they're all doing great. And this one is straggling along at 14. Well, what are good values? Basically anything above 10 is a good connection. So even though this one is on the low side and it may look like it's performing badly, it's actually performing just fine. Everything below 10 starts to get slow. And although those units may be able to show a new image or stay connected to the base station, a firmware update is such a large file that the transfer process takes too long. The ESL has an internal clock and it says, okay, this operation has been going on for too long, there's an issue, I'm going to prevent going on with this, I may be just frozen, there may be an issue somewhere. So the answer is pretty simple. If your ESL is far away from the base station, bring it close to the base station and try it again. If that's not the issue, we've got an episode on the base stations. You may want to perform an energy scan, because if your labels are reporting bad link quality, even though they are physically close to your base station, that probably means that another wireless protocol is hampering your communications. And just as a quick reminder, you can get the energy scan through the base station menu. You take a look at the base station that is having issues updating its ESLs, and you can say, well, I want to connect to that one, start a scan, and then you can compare what channel am I currently on, and is there a lot of traffic on that channel. And you may want to change the channel. However, if you do that, you might encounter another little, well, I wouldn't call it an issue, because basically it is to be expected. For instance, I have two EBSs on channel 11. That's a bad idea, because those will interfere with each other. So I will say that this base station will now start to communicate on channel 20. And I press save, and I go back to the list. It is restarting to update its new settings, because changing channel is a resettable issue configuration. And once it reconnects, you can see that there are no more ESLs on board. Well, actually, that might seem that there's an issue. It had ESLs before, and now it doesn't have any of them. What's gone wrong? Well, basically, nothing's really gone wrong, but changing the channel means that all of your labels that were connected to the base station and are thinking, oh, base station EBS-50 is on channel 11, I will communicate with him on channel 11. Because I know what channel he is on, no use in using all of the channels that I am allowed to scan on, because I'm connected to a base station. Changing the channel basically means the base station is different than it was before. And changing the name of the base station, the LAN ID, the PAN ID, or the channel will cause the labels that were connected to it to momentarily disappear. But that is not an issue, because if we go to the ESLs and we look at all of the details, you can see these three columns: a poll interval, a poll timeout, and the scan channels. And basically what that means is the poll interval means how many seconds pass between each time the ESL tries to communicate with the base station and get its latest information. And poll timeout means how many of those polls are allowed to fail before I can assume that the base station is offline and I'll try and find a new one. And the setting here is 10 times. So that means that after 200 seconds, the labels that were connected to the EBS-40 and are no longer able to find it because it's no longer on the channel that it was on, will start searching again. And where will they search? Well, on every single channel that is listed in their scan channels setting. And since our base station moved from channel 11 to channel 20, and channel 20 is in that scan channel list, after 200 seconds, the first ESLs will think, time to look for a new base station, and they will probably get back to the EBS-40, but now on channel 20. So those are the most basic troubleshooting tips with regards to the ESLs, the base stations, and the database. If you want more information about our system, you can check out our entire playlist with tutorials. If you have any further questions, you can contact Opticon. Both the link to the playlist and all of the contact information for Opticon can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.